Unit H21 workbook, Section C, professional examples. The style of children's theatre. After reviewing and watching the professional examples given to me by college, which was the Gruffalo and the Boards, this is how I would best sum up the style of children's theatre. I would best describe children's theatre as like the acting style is big and it has lots of energy. Genuinely just because the audience is younger, so their attention span is shorter. But children's theatre is very multifaceted in the style of it. So the acting style may be really big and out there, like you're performing for the back row, the front row of the back row, if that makes sense. You're performing for the front row at the back row, so you've got to be very big, animated, react bigger because the attention spans are shorter and the brains will not be able to really pick up on subtlety. It's got to be quite slapstick-esque with how you react to things. But it's not just a very big style of theatre, because I found that sometimes the set and the costume can be very minimal because our audience are children, so their imagination is way more active than a 25-year-old man would be. So what I found is that the set sometimes is quite minimal. It might just be a backdrop with a few trees if it's set in a forest, or the costume might literally just be some ears and the person's a mouse. In the Gruffalo, for example, the person who plays the mouse only has a bit of makeup on, if I remember correctly, and some mouse ears. So the style of children's theatre is quite a contrasting one in the sense of acting stylistics and set and sound design, and it's also quite multifaceted in the way that the majority of children's theatre show will implement some sort of musical element or some sort of dance element somewhere. So for example, in the Gruffalo, I'm pretty sure, I know for a fact when the snake enters, there is a musical moment with maracas and playing Mexican music. So it is a very, very multifaceted style of theatre. Another thing I wanted to mention with the style of theatre, children's theatre usually does have sometimes physical theatre to tell a story, because again, the imaginations of our audience are the brightest which will ever come watch the show. So we'll do physical theatre to pretend someone's flying. I know, for example, it's a Peter Pan production by the National Theatre, I think, which did, when he's flying, it was just a simple physical theatre lift. So because of the audience, the style of theatre, you can implement so many styles of theatre in there, if that makes sense. Because the audience is so young, you can have physical theatre, you can have musicals, you can have slapstick comedy, and you can all have that with a very minimal set. The content of children's theatre shows. Usually the content is quite easy to see plots. Like the plots aren't long, they are complicated, they're not very nuanced, they're very point A to point B, finish it at point C. Because again, children's imagination and attention span are massive, so they can engage with a show at a limited capacity for emotional intelligence, if that makes sense. So when I say they can engage into a show of a limited capacity, you're not going to really perform Shakespeare to children in the classical language, because they just want to be able to understand it. They need to be able to understand and grasp the story, because what's the point of making a show for children if you don't get it? But the content is usually light-hearted. It isn't anything too heavy or too deep, because the audience aren't emotionally prepared to take on a dramatic play. It's just they're not ready for that type of density, and their age isn't ready for it either. But the content is usually there could be lots of different ideas flown around with it, so it's usually quite familiar ideas though. So for example, it could be a family of cubs experience something any family can, but because it's cubs, the children will be more engaged, and then you can really, with the content you've got, you can really use metaphors and deeper storytelling through a childlike gauge of a couple of family of cubs going through something deeper. But yeah, the content is light-hearted, I'd say. 1,000,000%. It is comical. There's a lot of audience interaction. You know, make the kids feel involved with the show they're watching, and it's usually quite wholesome. Like, there's never really. I couldn't think of one children's theatre show which ends in tragedy, which doesn't end on a positive note. It's very positive. It is meant to be a positive experience for the children. May it be with what they're watching on stage, may it be it's positive because there's jokes and there's slapstick comedy and the song and dance, or is it positive for the themes? It is a very positive, light-hearted, light-hearted show for children, especially with the plots. The plots are, again, light-hearted, easy to digest, not difficult to comprehend and understand, and that is the point of children's theatre. We're not here to make these kids grapple with really deep and profound ideas. We're here to create a story, which will kids will be able to understand and maybe broaden their horizons with it. Or it could be just plain old panto silly nonsense. You know, that is what we're meant to here to do. And the plots aren't convoluted. Like I said before, it's from point A to point B, end it at point C. You don't want to confuse the children. You don't want them to really not be able to grasp what's going on, because it's just a waste of time. And I feel like also as fair makers would be wasting our time doing that. Sorry, stylistic devices from my own personal research and my own personal knowledge of going to children's theatre shows as a child. I think the stylistic devices are, you know, audience participation, song and dance, music, you know, all these stimulating things, because as a child, your mind tends to wander off elsewhere, especially if you've never been in a theatre before and you've seen all these lights and you've seen all these things going on around you. You're going to wander off, so they use stuff like song and dance, audience participation, jokes, slapstick comedy, props and lighting and all those type of things. These stylistic devices are used to keep the audience engaged and entertained. And for characters, I feel like I think there is sort of stock characters I've been able to pinpoint. And when I say stock characters, I mean more so stereotype characters. So, for example, the Gruffalo, when I watched that, they made the snake a Mexican Macarena. I don't even know the right term. A stereotype of a Mexican man with his Macarinas and his beard and his big hat. And I feel like characters are not meant to be nuanced for children's theatre. They're not meant to be deep, complex individuals with character arcs, and that's not the point. That's not what we're meant to supply for the audience. They are meant to be able to easily identifiable characters, so when they reappear in the plot or when they first show up on stage, the kids know who this person is going to be, because again, it's not meant to be complicated or complex. So, for example, if there was a witch in a show, they go, ha ha ha, they laugh and they crawl on with the stereotypical physicality of a witch, because the children need to understand these characters. The characters are usually quite one note, usually quite stereotypical. It is what you'd expect a character of the caliber of a witch to be. Or the characters are also usually not human sometimes. The Gruffalo, prime example, are all anthropomorphic animal humanoid things. They don't have to be human because, you know, animals and monsters and creatures is probably more entertaining for a child. It is probably, I know when I was a kid I'd be way more inclined to watch a show if it's about a fox over than just a little boy, because it's something new, it's something different. it's playing to the audience's preferences. Production and technical features. From what I did on my own personal research for children's theatre shows, music is used a lot. Music is something which is used all the time to evoke emotion. So when the villain enters, there might be like an organ playing, and it's like doo, 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 to build that tension. It's that subconscious response to which we still have now, which they can really ham up to children. That subconscious response of this sound equals this about this person. So let's say they're playing like a dark, sad theme in a minor key. That reads to the children, oh, this person's bad. Or if let's play, they might play like a wacky sound or a wacky noise. It reads to the children, oh, this person's good or this person's silly. You know, so production and technical features are used all the time in children's fair, even for lighting. For example, let's say the witch analogy. She comes on and she's cackling and she's, you know, and they've got the dark organ song playing, and then she comes in and it's dark lighting, and it goes to like, you know what I mean? It reads to the cat, so the children have that subconscious response. We know who this person is. They're the villain. They're the comic relief. They're the Prince Charming. You know, production and technical features are used all the time to amplify that experience, to make it more digestible to the children. What is going on in stage? That's what I've seen. Personally, that is what I've perceived. That sound and lighting, the way it's used, is to just just to explain these characters to the children, explain what's going on, or just to explain something subconsciously without being like, without breaking the fourth wall, which is used all the time in children's theatre, to be fair, without breaking the fourth wall and like, this is a scary moment. The music and the lighting sells that for us, sells that for the children. Costume. The costume is like I said, it's quite minimal because combined with the performance, let's say you're playing a mouse or you're playing a snake, if you are like in Gruffalo, like when the snake is, you know, slithering, that's a slithery snake. That is the movement a snake does. So the costume doesn't have to be ultra realistic in the slightest. It doesn't have to be really at all. Like the mouse in the Gruffalo just has some ears, you know. It doesn't take a lot of convincing for children to be bought into an idea. It doesn't take loads and loads of convincing to really convince this child is this person on stage is a fox. If they say they're a fox and they've got some ears and a tail, they're a fox. So the costume is quite limited. And same with music. Music is usually light-hearted as well. Sorry, I got sidetracked because I was looking at the screen. So the costume is minimal because it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. We don't need a seamstress sewing an ultra realistic costume for a fox, because let's say you're creeping around like a fox and you've got your ears on the children, like that's a fox. There is certain shortcuts you can take with children's theatre because their imagination is so wild and it's such a beautiful thing that you don't have to really suspend their disbelief through costume to make this character look like what they are, because their imagination will buy it. Music. I touched on music before in production and technical features. I think something I should add about production and technical features, like the set doesn't have to be anything too extreme. The set can be very limited. It can just be a backdrop. It can just be a few trees. It can just be this box. This thing is a rock because we say it is, and it doesn't need to be too convoluted because that's a very overwhelming image to children. Let's say they're watching a show and they've got this really realistic castle. That is gonna probably distract the children from the show because this castle's so realistic. And again, like I said before, the beauty of children's theatre is that their imagination's so wild. It doesn't take too much convincing for them to be like, yeah, that's a castle. Music, like I touched on before, music can be used to make the children realise and understand what a character is, but it can also be used in like a, we've defeated the baddie at the end, and they have like a dance party to like a pop song. I've seen. I remember when I used to go to pantos, for example, as a child, they'd play like a quite popular pop song and they have a little dance party at the end. It's used all the time in children's media I know, for example, off the top of my head, Shrek 2, the ending of Shrek 2, they have the Live It'll Be the Loca scene. You know, but music is used in a lot of ways to introduce a character, to even for like a dance break, you know, to keep this audience engaged with what's being portrayed to them. They might tell a story through song, or it might be Cinderella, for example, and it's the ball, so they play a song and they do a dance. It is just to make this experience the best for the audience, which is children and the parents as well. Okay, section C. Acting style, like I touched on before, the acting style is big, slapstick. There's a lot of physicalization of bringing these characters to life, especially if they're anthropomorphic. So the acting style is quite big because children have short attention spans and it's more accessible to their brains to see a caricature of a character. Singing. Singing is used in quite a lot. It could be used for a time skip, like we're going on a journey, we're singing a song. Singing could be even used to be used in introducing the character. I know for the Gruffalo, I keep mentioning the snake, don't I? The snake comes in and he's singing a Mexican song to say, I am a Mexican snake. You know, it is usually used to introduce characters or introduce a scene or to end the show. I've seen it used quite a lot in pantomimes. Um, but yeah, singing, it is usually live singing. It is, they do have, you know, sometimes they might put like a track with vocals on it, but it's usually live singing, which I've seen used. Musical, like I said before, like there is dance breaks, there is musical breaks, and it's just used for the effects to make this a more enjoyable experience for children. Audience interaction and participation is used a lot as well. It is like I've seen in so many children's theatre shows. When this project was launched, I already knew with the show I am going to create, there is going to be a moment of, hi kids, let's break the fourth wall. It's and participation and all that stuff. It's just a given in children's theatre because the reason it's probably used in every children's theatre show is because it's so sorry just because it's so recognizable because it works. It's so recognizable because it works. It works because it keeps the children engaged. You're making them a part of this story. They feel like they're a part of the show. It just and it really, you know, it puts a smile on their face for the person you point out in the crowd. Like, what's your name? Oh, you know what I mean? Those audience participation interaction moments really make it an enjoyable experience for a child. And that's all we're doing here. We're just trying to make an enjoyable experience for children. Narration is used all the time as well. It's great to move a scene along. It is good to introduce a show. It's good to end a show. It is just a very, very, very useful technique. Not even just children's theatre, not even just in children's theatre shows, just in shows in general. It is narration. Is just a very good technique to use to open the story. Um, dialogue isn't anything too insane. From my research, dialogue it's usually quite minimal. It's usually quite childlike. It's never usually anything too in depth. It's the dialogue's mostly used to make a joke or make the story go along or to finish the story. The dialogue is never anything too extreme, anything too hard to bite on because theatre, the experience of a child going to the theatre is quite an extreme situation for them to be in. So you don't want to really overwhelm them with so much dialogue like you would in a Shakespeare show. And choral speaking and the use of a chorus is used quite a lot. Just because, again, it's a stimulating, exciting thing for children. It's probably exciting for the theatre makers to use, and it does, you know, if the chorus on stage is easily to capture into the children, they can do the chorus and it's just a more enjoyable experience. And this is the professional examples